So the recording has just started. So let us all begin. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're happy to have you here. On behalf of our president and the board, I'd just like to welcome you all to this Wednesday webinar. We are the National Black MBA DC chapter, an award-winning chapter. We were just recognized as Large Chapter of the Year for this year at our conference in Chicago just last month. So we're happy to have you here. Our mission here is to provide education, economic empowerment, and to promote the personal and professional advancement of our members. So we're glad to have you here and hope that you will benefit from the presentation from our featured speaker. So we have Bill Sherman. I will read his biography because he has too many accomplishments and I couldn't make flashcards in time to read it. But let me read his biography. So Bill Sherman is currently the founder and president of Pendulum Analytics, a risk management company using machine learning to help people make decisions. Prior to launching Pendulum Analytics in 2019, Bill was a founder and product manager of Atlantic Integrated Vision. At Atlantic, Bill was responsible for all the company's product development, sales, and operations, including end-to-end management of product delivery and solutions management.
Well,
can I please remind folks to mute your phones? Thank you so much. So basically, Bill was in charge of sales and management. Bill and his co-founder were fortunate enough to sell their technology to a fintech company, Jack Henry and Associates. Upon sale of the tech, the team chose to dissolve the firm. Before becoming an entrepreneur, Bill started his career at IBM and then went to spend several years at Promontory Interfinancial Network, now Intrafy. At these two firms, Bill developed the ideas behind the technology used to launch Atlantic Integrated Vision and Pendulum Analytics. While at IBM, Bill managed technology projects for IBM's DB2 and Cognos sales team in the firm's banking division. While at Promontory, Bill managed the company's system integration capabilities, ensuring millions of transactions between 5,000 banks settled daily. Bill earned his MBA as well as his Master's of Finance from the University of Maryland's Robert H. Smith School of Business, where he was the CFO of the MBA Association. Bill also has a Master's of Science in Information System from UMBC and a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science from Kennesaw State University. So please join me in welcoming Bill. Yay. And one moment, please, as I share my screen so you can see his presentation. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
We can.
Oops, let me just try this one more time. One moment. All right. All right, I think that's better. So you guys can still see?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Bill, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, Sarah, you're right. That introduction was kind of long. I should have got it to you earlier so you can chop it down a bit. But I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate you asking me to speak in front of your board and the organization. So I highly appreciate that. So thank you and to your leadership for having me. And thank you all for joining this presentation as we speak about my firm, Pendulum Analytics, as well as entrepreneurship and what I consider to be the pillars of a successful entrepreneurial firm, a successful startup business, but particularly my strengths would be in the financial management arena. So I'm going to speak to that given the limited amount of time. So as Sarah mentioned, my firm is Pendulum Analytics, a firm that I started in 2019 while finishing up my MBA program at University of Maryland. Prior to that, my background is completely technology, mostly in the financial services arena. And during my experience over the last 15 years, I've noticed a ton of pain points that these institutions, banking institutions were experiencing, what gave me the idea, just as Sarah spoke of, to many of the products that I've created. And luckily, one of the products that I created, we were able to actually sell to a larger fintech firm. So that was a great win. And from there, founders, I will speak about later, the team that you have must work well together. That's one thing I'll harp on. It's definitely great to have co-founders, great to have a team, a leadership team that works extremely well with one another, with complementary skill sets that can allow the company to take advantage of the target market and eventually thrive, right? So let's jump into it. My firm, Pendulum Analytics, we focus on risk management, financial risk management, operational risk to be particular. So I'll speak a lot about that. Then we're going to jump into the next section, which I will make a little bit interactive for those of you who are interested in entrepreneurship. The key pillars of entrepreneurship. And again, the focus will be on financial management. Putting the financial foundation to your firm so that you can handle all the ebbs and flows of a business. Not all, but majority of. I think that's key because one of the main reasons I should say that companies fail is because they run out of money. So it's in your best interest to manage your money well. All right, but first thing, let's jump into what I do with my company. I think we can skip this slide. We already introduced myself. Thank you very much. All right, so what we want to do, my firm that is, we want to help financial institutions and any other organization that delves into the financial arena, financial services arena, manage risks, operational risks to be particular. With banks, we help them identify a problem. Right now, major issues may occur, and in particularly in the transactional arena. If a transaction fails, that can be catastrophic. That could be loss of income. If it's a large loss in dollars, that's reputation damage. In compliance systems, the banks can get into a bad back and forth with a governing body such as the FDIC or the OCC, which is the Office of Comptroller and Currency. And not to mention, when issues occur and they're not fixed, and nobody feels that those problems should be fixed because not on a priority list, it can result in low team morale. Next slide. And as I mentioned, there's just too much room for error. And a lot of these things happen because these institutions, unfortunately, they don't have the resources in place, especially when we talk about banks are typically measured in asset size, anywhere from 8 billion in assets to trillions of dollars in assets. The trillions of dollars are the Bank of Americas of the world, the Citibank, so on and so forth. The smaller banks could be local banks like Advanced Bank or Sandy Springs Bank or Eagles Bank, which are anywhere between 8 billion and 40 billion in asset size. Unfortunately, those smaller banks just don't have the resources. They don't have the people nor the capital to put in the technology to prevent a lot of these losses from occurring. And so with that being said, a lot of the issues are not fixed until the end of the day, end of the month, potentially end of year, and somebody's left holding the bag, somebody's hair is on fire. And that's typically the bank operational personnel. And so what we're trying to do, my firm, is help them streamline these processes with both technology and knowledge that they can use to actually mitigate a lot of these issues. Next slide, Pete. Sarah? So what are the banks currently doing to mitigate these issues? If they have the capital, right, they will hire a team of 4 to 5 people with various skill sets. And this team is an expensive team, especially now, right? When a typical solutions architect, for instance, can cost you upwards of $200,000 annually to house that person to solve these issues or create solutions to your problems. So then if you really sum up the costs on an annual basis, it can cost more than $1 million for these banks when they can leverage a product that it's secure enough to fit within their walls to solve a lot of these problems. Next slide. So how do we work? Typically, we just contact banks, we walk in there, we conduct an assessment, right? They know the issue, or they may not, and we have to demonstrate where the issues may lie, right? And we determine if it's the people, the processes, or the technology that's in place. We put in a set of technology and processes to mitigate these problems via fixing. And then it's our intent to train their people so that they are able to recognize these issues when they occur, right? Whether there's cybersecurity issues, whether they're some representative or bank teller enters a wrong account number, social security number, or it's on a network level where IP addresses, which are typically the names of the computers that we use, do not necessarily match or they're not recognized. So those are the things we typically advise these bank personnel on, how to recognize these issues and what tools and what type of skill sets are necessary to mitigate them. Next slide. And so our technology, and I'm delivering this almost like a pitch because we're talking about entrepreneurship. So it's a flow of problem, solution, value proposition, value add. So here we're talking about my technology. It's a SaaS product which can be delivered anywhere in the world, to any institution in the world, although we focus more so within the 4 walls of the United States, right? And that's just because we're a young fledgling organization. We cannot be all things to all people. So we want to adhere to the supervisory organization, which is Office of Comptroller and Currency, which all these banks are under, and they have to abide by those rules. So we just find it best to play in this particular space because of the cost effectiveness to that strategy. Okay. And here's other features when we talk about what we deliver, what we allow for, which is robust automated communication via any type of mobile device, as well as desk or laptop. We try to disseminate information to people ultimately so that they can have their finger on the trigger to make the appropriate decisions. Okay, next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're delivered via desktop, type of mobile device, whether that's a Mac, iPad, or iPhone, or any type of, I forgot what they're actually called. Nonetheless, not important. But certainly our delivery model is so that regardless of what mechanism, what mobile device that you're using, you're able to get information and the capability to make decisions about the transactions that your organizations are executing. Next slide, please. Speaking once again about how it works, how our technology works, the failed transaction, the failed operational task that results in a loss of some kind. Let's say in this particular scenario, it's 150K in income, which means that this particular transactions are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. If you give a couple of basis points, which can yield you 150K. The solution that we have is, okay, something's in the background monitoring these transactions, monitoring the flow of transactions. Now, once an issue is potential to cause a potential issue, we, the technology that is, may inform the appropriate decision makers to act. And we, given the permission of the technology, given the permission of the stakeholder, can take action to resolve that problem in the immediate, ultimately resulting in the elimination of income loss. And what does this truly yield? The value prop is both the income loss, the trust now with the clients, and the clients can either be individuals or other institutions that they're conducting transactions with. Ultimately, we want to protect and mitigate risks for our clients. Next slide, please. And just to touch on one, once again, our delivery model is via mobile device, web browser of some sort. It's typically referred to as SaaS, or software as a service. The purchasing model, so to speak, is subscription-based, where we have a basic, premium, and a freemium tier. And when it comes to customization, some institutions, all institutions are not alike. So they may have policy that may require some customizations. So we definitely offer, customizations to our product line as well. Next slide, please. And the value prop, right? We want to ultimately build a lasting relationship, help our clients build a lasting relationship with the people that they serve or institutions that they serve. So that's trust, that's compliance, that's business continuity, and there's the appropriate resource allocation. When you're able to deploy a technology like we have, that team that costs $1 million plus may not necessarily be needed for these particular issues. Those resources can be reallocated to other projects on the team. That's the goal. Okay, next slide. All right, this is where, well, first thing I want to do is, before we jump into key pillars of entrepreneurship, are there any questions thus far? Do you see any, Sarah, at all?
No questions in the chat so far.
Okay. So let's move on to the entrepreneurship portion, the key pillars.
Well, actually, wait, I have a question though,
Sure
for you,
thing.
Bill. How did you get interested in risk?
You know, I've been participating in risk my entire career. I first started at IBM, and I was working for, what was it, JP Morgan Chase. I was consulting to JP Morgan Chase, and what they wanted to do was ensure that customer profiles were always up to date, because you may have variations in names, they be wrong information such as social security number, address, things of that nature. And so what that typically can potentially cause is a mismanagement of customer profiles, particularly if a cyber attack occurs where someone tries to actually create a false profile. They would easily be able to do so if in fact there wasn't truly a one source of that customer's profile. No one will actually know which one is fake and which one is real. So with that being said, I kind of cut my teeth in the risk management, operational risk arena at IBM. And since then, it just grew as a strength throughout my career. And naturally, I believe beyond that, I think naturally I'm a risk manager. When it comes to churning out through life, I pretty much focus on preventing myself or anyone else, such as my wife and kids, from doing crazy things or costing us a ton. So my intent is to a lot of times mitigate a lot of these issues before they occur. So both professionally and organically, I've been a risk manager. So it just falls into my plate naturally, I think. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know, not to mention, I took a lot of classes in business school about risk management. So I just thought to double down on that skill set. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are interested in entrepreneurship or launching your own firm, I would truly recommend that you focus on these 5 pillars, right? Beyond having a solid product, a solid service that's in demand in the marketplace, at the end of the day, you must generate revenue or you must generate traction. So with that being said, you have to identify that target market and you must know them well enough to sell to them, right? However they want to be sold to, however they want to consume the product or services that you're trying to deliver. And so that's why I say sales are marketing in no particular order, by the way. Sales and marketing are truly extremely important. With a product and no sales, you truly don't have a business. And if customers don't know who you are or what your company, such as by leveraging a good marketing strategy, you won't necessarily be able to actually attract or contact or communicate with those folks. So you have to have these things in place, sales and marketing, to let people know in the world that you're out there, this is your product, so that you can at least try it. And if they like it, consume it. And if they don't, they can give you feedback so that you can adjust or pivot as you see fit. Okay. Team and leadership. I'm sorry?
Oh, I was like, we have a question in the chat. But yes, this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on the YouTube channel for the National Black MBA Association. Sorry, continue.
No worries. I was talking about team and leadership, especially if beyond being a sole proprietor, and even if you are a sole proprietor, right, and you outsource some of your work, you must be able to work well with the people that you outsource some of your work to, right? But if you have a team in-house, if you're able to have co-founders, or you're able to hire some people aboard, those folks should be able to complement you in some way, shape, or fashion, right? Like I'm a technology guy with financial know-how. Yet again, I'm not the greatest sales guy. I'm not the greatest marketer. Good leader in my financial management skills, as you just spoke of, is pretty good as well, but it's not great. My strength is operational risk technology and figuring out problems and how to mitigate those problems before they occur and how to mitigate them once they do occur, right? So you should build a team of people that have sales experience if you do not, who can market your technology or your services because you're not the best at it, right? And if you don't have the financial skills, hire an accountant. I think two of the key people to any firm is a legal counsel, an attorney, as well as an accountant. One of the reasons accounting is extremely important because you want to leverage the tax benefits that are out there, right, to save yourself some money if you are generating revenue. But as I spoke of, we're going to primarily focus on financial management. But if anyone has questions on sales, marketing, team, or leadership, please feel free to ask. Next slide, please. All right, so how to stay alive and thrive. And I think that pretty much boils down to your ability to manage your capital well, right? So from a financial perspective, working capital, how you price your product or services, your ability to be agile with your finances. You're not stuck with a couple bucks and you have to pay a particular bill with that. You don't want to be in that position. And you want to, take financial risk in consideration. How do you mitigate risks, right? All right, so let's jump into the first one, working capital. Next slide, please. All right, so when you do start your firm, you want to do so with some money. So you receive that money in some shape, form, or fashion, whether that's debt capital, you've received a commercial loan from a financial institution, you received a gift, a non-dilutive capital grant from a government agency or your university, like I did, or some other social conscious organization, right? And of course, there are those dilutive capital organizations such as venture VCs, venture capitalists, as well as institutional investors. There is one other group, angel investors, which don't necessarily fit in either bucket, but those are folks who you should approach in the very closer to the beginning startup of your firm than later, right? Venture angel investors or venture capitalists, I should say, and institutional investors should be approached maybe when you're generating either quite a bit of revenue, or if you have a social media product of some sort to demonstrate traction, people actually using the services or product that you're creating, right? Traction can be either revenue, demonstrated via revenue generation or usage. All right, next slide. Pricing. A lot of folks don't take all these aspects into consideration. Operational expense, cost of doing goods and services, non-OpEx. You sum all those costs, pretty much that's what they're called, costs, and the units that you must sell or you're able to sell, and that's to be determined, that's your pricing, right? What you really want to do is take care of all your costs, and operational expense does include your salary as a business owner, and you're the person to determine that amount, and any other person, any other payroll costs or payroll tax costs that you may have, right? You want to take all those costs into consideration, and then divide that by the units that you potentially produce. When you have a consulting business, the units sold would be in hours, if that's what you're charging, or if it's a SaaS product, you can charge per user, right? And as your company grows and as more users are onboarded, you're able to charge less because the units sold is growing, so the cost per unit will be less. And that's what your pricing should be. Right? I'm open to taking questions if I wasn't super clear on that. So pricing should consider all your costs and what you're actually able to sell in the market, right? But if in the event that your costs outweigh the potential in revenue, you may want to reassess the business opportunity. But pricing is extremely important. A lot of folks should think thoroughly about that. Okay, next slide, please. When we talk about financial agility, and this is where I would advise obtaining the services, if you don't necessarily have the skill set, obtaining the services of a professional, right? Whether that's an accountant who's a certified public accountant, a certified financial analyst, or a financial risk manager, someone with some financial skill set that can help you truly forecast, whether that's 3 years to 5 years out, right? Where you want to be to set those goals. And this is applicable to, as a founder of a firm, your financials as well, because you truly want to get a great handle on your financials so you're not stuck. Now, putting it in a position to not be completely focused on the business because your mind is placed on other non-business tasks, right? But I say financial agility because you want to be flexible. You want to have the flexibility with your finances to act when the market demands, right? If there's an opportunity, you want to jump at it. If there is a business that's going out of business and you want to acquire it, it's great to have the capital to do so, right? You always want to track your costs, as I just spoke of, pertaining to price, but also your revenue, especially accounts receivable, who's paying, which customers are paying, who has paid, and who has yet to pay for services or product that you're creating. Right? Next slide, please. And last but not least, risk management. How do you go about, if you do have the capital, this plays into financial agility as well. How do you allocate your capital in such a fashion that it's working for you, right? If you have set your let's say you're a you're a single, you're a sole proprietor, the easiest example I can come up with. You're a sole proprietor and you've been able to generate, your consultant to the federal government, and you've been able to generate 1,980 hours the entire year, which yields you $200,000. But you only need to pay yourself $40,000. So the best bet is in the other 160 should go and retain earnings, right? And if it is in retained earnings, you should probably look to invest that money. Let that money work for you, right? So you may want to invest that money into some safe harbors, whether that's a fixed income product, which is a municipal bond or something that's not going to lose you significant amount of capital. If you do put it in a stock or a public institution, right? Depending on your risk tolerance, right? Allocate those funds in such a fashion that you're going to generate revenue income from your allocation than not, right? That's what you truly want to do. You also want to make sure when it comes to credit management, to make sure you're in a position to acquire capital when you need it. So that's making sure your personal credit is in order, as well as your business credit is in order. That's something you should constantly monitor and make sure it's at a level or a score that's going to yield you an opportunity to actually get capital from a financial institution. Debt capital, one would think, but also dilutive and non-dilutive capital. Because these angel investors and venture capitalists will look at your background to see if you're a good fit to get their money and if you're going to keep to your word to build or do what you say with the business. So that's extremely critical. So a lot of folks just think credit pertains to bank or acquiring a loan, but it's a testament to your character. If you're truly the person that you say that you are, and if you're going to use the money that these investors are giving you appropriately, regardless if it's an institutional investor, an angel investor, or the federal government, they're going to look at your credit, both personal as well as the business credit. And last but not least, market risk. You always want to get a good understanding of the market that you're playing in, right? The target market. You want to know your customers' business model or what interests them. I'm thinking more so when I talk about business model, other businesses, come on B2B, business to business organization, we don't necessarily service individuals. So based on that approach, we want to understand their business model. We want to understand their customer. We want to understand their market. So not only your market, but your customer's market is extremely important. So, and you want to understand the ebbs and flows, what's currently happening in the market, and manage that the best as you possibly can. Hedging is a good approach. Next slide, please. And that's pretty much it. Open to questions. This is my contact. If anyone wants to reach out, dive a little bit deeper into the topics that I've touched on. But thank you for your attention.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, let me see if I can put this in the chat. But thank you so much for sharing. I definitely have a couple questions, but wanted to open it up to others. You can go ahead and unmute or put it in the chat, whichever you're most comfortable with would be fine. But I guess as we're waiting, I have one, like maybe just more like a big picture question about lessons learned. So you've done this a couple times. What would you do differently the next time around, the next time you start a business? Because I bet you will. What is something that you will do differently next time based on the experiences you've had starting, selling, and starting companies?
You know, when I first started, my first go around, I tried to have a perfect product. And I put a ton of energy, I put a lot of my own money into developing that product. And it could have been disastrous if I failed. Right. And so I would say to folks that you don't necessarily need a perfect product to go to market. You should try to get close to market ready as you potentially can. People typically call that the minimal viable product. And how to determine the minimal viable product is by talking to your potential customers, seeing what their needs are, trying to determine what pains they have. And rather than building a complete solution, come up with the minimal viable solution, so to speak, that will get them from, that will solve some piece of the process of what they're doing now, right? What they currently, understand what they're currently doing and try to solve a piece of that in the very immediate, rather than the entire solution, probably put the entire solutions in place. So that's what I would say. It's more cost effective to do it that way. And it's a learning process. And once you do that, you're now involving your potential customer as well. And once you do that, you get their buy-in. And once they have skin in the game, they're more likely to buy, right? So that's what I would say. My next go round, even this go round, I didn't even use, I got it when I first started. I got $25,000 at the University of Maryland. I got some federal government cash, and I got a line of credit, all of which I used to build a relationship with a large institution, which is Amazon Web Services, that actually gave me additional credits to use their products, cloud management products, to actually start my company or build a product, right? So there are ways to go about starting a firm with minimal capital, and then from there, build as you need more. And that's only the case when you start from a minimal viable solution, a minimal viable product.
Mm.
So don't build, in my opinion, don't build the flushed out solution before you get started. That's how Uber started. That's how Facebook, that's how a lot of these large companies, there are large companies now, started by something that was not perfect, far from, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I think that makes it a little bit less intimidating.
Exactly, but because when I was doing it, I was thinking, oh my goodness, am I actually going to be able to do this thing? When I first started, right? When I left IBM, I was thinking, did I mess up my life by jumping into the waters? But as I learned, I became more aware of opportunity, as well as access to capital became available to me, and doors opened. So I'm grateful for that.
Actually, I'd like to.
Question.
Oh, go ahead.
No, please feel free to finish your thought there. It may have been impactful.
So just wanted to say, Bill, about, you mentioned about working at IBM, and I was just thinking about employment. Most of us have jobs. Some of us have dreams of being entrepreneur, but it's a little scary. So I was just wondering for you, was it a push or a pull to go into entrepreneurship?
When you say push, did some event push me, or did I have the desire that pulled me? What do you mean, push or pull?
Yeah, so basically, is it something you really wanted to do and you had these dreams and you just went for it? Or was it like something frustrated you being an employee and you're like, forget it, I can do better on my own. I'm done with this. I was just wondering if it was more of a positive or a negative thing that got you out.
Sure, so it was both. I've always had the desire to become an entrepreneur, to launch my own company. And so even when I was working professionally in corporate America, I would oftentimes when I do take a break or take a lunch break, I would probably doodling a solution to something. And in this particular case, which is now Instagram, by the way, in 2010, I would sit down and I would write how people can leverage their own likeness to make money on social media. Because typically we wear fashion with name brands, right? And so what we're currently doing is marketing somebody else's brand for free. So I was thinking, why not leverage social media or some other platform or a website, a web page, to do that for yourself? but Instagram beat me to it. So Instagram or any other social media platform beat me to it. So I always had the desire, but scared, just as you talked about, scared to do it. It didn't know how. I don't have any entrepreneurs. Actually, one entrepreneur in my family, but my uncle was a detail guy. He detailed cars for a living. In fact, that was my first job. But no one to build a company into a multi-million-dollar company, take a company public. What does added value mean? Those type of lessons I did not know. So the event that actually pushed me to entrepreneurship was a disagreement with a boss, where I felt that unhappy and betrayed a bit, and felt that my career was being threatened. So rather than having somebody threaten or derail my career, I could do it myself. And I chose to leave the last organization I was with to start my first company. Knowing this stuff, knowing that there was a problem in the market that I could solve. So I knew that there was a problem that I can solve. So that's what I would say. Don't leave anything that's a sure bet if there's no market for it. So you have to know that there's a problem, somebody's willing to pay you to solve that problem.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
It does. Go ahead, Danielle. I think it was you who was speaking.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the presentation, Bill. It's been really insightful and informative. So thank you for joining us tonight. I have a question in particular about the advice that you would share with a startup or new business, new entrepreneurial person who crafted or started their business right around the start of the pandemic and maybe didn't, get the level of flight that they were looking for because of these unfortunate events. What would be some of the advice that you would give to them besides don't quit, which is probably one of your things, but what would you tell those new startup companies around that time?
Manage financials well, that's one. Secondly, there's nothing wrong with pivoting. Nothing wrong with pivoting. If there is not a market that you thought would be for the product or service that you have, see where your product or skill can be applied elsewhere. Where other target market can that product be sold, or product help someone solve a problem, right? So that's what I would say. A lot of folks don't necessarily think about the whole process of pivoting, right? I like the idea, don't quit, but don't quit. A lot of folks don't really think about their financial situations as well. Like, for instance, myself, I'm married with 3 kids. If I cannot generate money, then I cannot stay an entrepreneur much longer, right? So then I would have to go back to corporate America to generate money. Right. So that's just logical thinking from my perspective. But if I have the capital, and that's why I mostly focus on one of the primary reasons businesses fail because of lack of money. When you first start off, make sure that you have some form of capital. And how do you get that? Is by approaching first, of course, people say approach friends, families, and the joke to it is fools, because those are people who invest into are super risky. Any startup is super risky, right? But these are most of us, we don't have access to angel investors or venture capitalists in the very beginning. So we have to go somewhere if we don't have the money ourselves. So of course, what does that mean? Talking to your friends, talking to your family, if they do buy into the product or service, you have to give them something back. And oftentimes that's equity in your firm. Right, so you give them significant amount of money or significant amount of ownership in your company, because that early capital that you're getting is the most expensive capital that you'll possibly get. Right, in the event you're able to grow your business to a level that's generating you millions of dollars. Right, in that particular instance, let's say, for instance, you gave out 20% of your company to your best friend. Well, you only have 80%, and so that $1 million that you're generating is in your pocket. If you're able to sell the company, is only $800,000. your investor, that initial investor, has $200,000 if truly 20% was given to that person, right? But that investment allowed you to launch and potentially, survive a potential pandemic, right? So that's one of the reasons I harp on managing financial wealth, and part of that is acquiring the necessary capital to start, sustain, and grow your business. And on top of that, in the fact your product or service is not sticking as you thought it would, try to find another application for that technology, for that service, or for that product. You don't necessarily have to quit, especially if you have resources available to you. Does that make sense, Danielle?
It does. Thank you so much.
No worries. I was wondering if Mrs. Woods had any questions.
Ha ha ha. I did, and just that quickly I forgot. So let me come back to my thoughts.
I'm
But
sorry for
I
calling
did
you
ask.
out.
I did have something to ask.
Yes, Mrs. Woods and I were on the different years, MBA associations at the Smith School of Business. So that's why I called her out. Any other questions?
I actually do have one more. About pricing, actually. And so you did provide the formula. And I would imagine that it's a little bit easier for people to identify their expenses, but it's kind of hard to predict the units sold in order to know how to divide that number. And so I was just wondering, the first time you did it, how off were you, or did you kind of hit it right in getting like that formula, especially that denominator, to try to determine what's the right price to maximize your profit, but not scare away your customer?
Sure thing. So it was kind of easy for me when I first started. It was when I first went into entrepreneurship, I was a consultant, right? And my technical ability allowed me to get a IT consulting position pretty quickly as an independent consultant. So with that being said, the unit would be the hourly wage, right? So I determined my costs. My costs were pretty much my living expenses. If you really think about it, I'm offering ultimately my knowledge to someone else. So what does that entail? Transportation, housing, groceries, utilities. That includes internet services. All of that I put in a spreadsheet, and I determined, okay, every month I needed $4,000 to take care of all my living expenses, including student loans, everything, right? Those are all my expenses. So I determined that based on that, I truly only needed to charge my customers maybe $25 an hour, but market rate was $100 an hour. So I wasn't going to charge 25, I was going to charge the 100. That's only applicable if I'm working 40 hours a week. Remember that. So if I'm able to work 40 hours times 52, that's approximately 2,080 hours per year on an annual basis. So if I took all of my expenses divided by that number, that's why I get that approximately $25 an hour mark. That was the price I would charge a customer per hour, right? And so I did that prior to going to jumping into entrepreneurship, starting that independent consulting journey. But so in another example, the product that we created, we sold a installation basis. In that particular instance, we have 3 guys, so everyone put in their living expenses because we're just a startup company with Atlantic Integrated Vision. Took everybody's living expenses. We then took all the costs associated with building the product and thought to ourselves, okay, this is the cost that we have on a monthly basis, and for an annual basis, I should say. And then we determine how much do we need to sell? How many licenses do we need to sell in order to meet this cost, right? And then as I learned this from IBM, they want at least 15% in profit. So that's just an arbitrary number that we chose. 15% profit on top of what costs. So we just multiplied, let's say $100,000, multiplied by that 15% number, and we got our base price. We can't sell a license for less than that amount, or we're going to go out of business. And then we looked at the marketplace. How many clients can we truly target, and how many of them will really buy? And how we do that is by going out and asking them, right? Is this truly a pain for you? How much would you pay for this product if we are able to build it? What obstacles would you have for installing it, right? In order to gauge our probability of success in selling the product or selling the license. So we took all of that into consideration, given the market, given the number of firms who mentioned that they would purchase. And then that's the number we took and divided it by the cost, which included profit, to get the final price that we could potentially charge the market. And once we asked them, okay, we came up with this number, are you willing to pay this much to solve the problem? And another question that you need to know, how much is it costing them now to solve that problem? And if what you actually are willing to charge them, it's much less than what it cost them to do so now, then that's when you have a viable market, right? A viable product and pricing strategy to go to market with. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So a lot of thought goes into it, of course, and a lot of activity, but those are the things you just have to do in order to make sure you're just not jumping off the ledge into something that you know nothing about. That's why I say thrive, then survive. No, survive and thrive. There we go, survive and thrive.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Sorry, I thought you said you had like 100 questions. Sorry?
I don't want to. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You were
Oh,
frozen.
I was just saying, yeah, I don't want to dominate the conversation more than I already have.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
My question is, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who may have already started a business years ago, who are now trying to restart their business?
With that being said, my question would be, is the market for the service or product does it still exist? That's the first question. And if you started a while back, would your branding and marketing strategy still be applicable in today's market, right? And because there are technology that one can use now to really brand and market their product. If you've taken advantage of that, that'll probably save you much more money, a lot of money, I should say. And so there's a lot more questions I would ask, I would say, but those are the first couple. You know, does the market still exist? Do you think do you have the resources to survive and thrive? And is your branding and marketing strategy applicable to the times? You know?
Yes.
You know, so is that your business or?
Yes, it is my business. It's kind of inherited.
May I ask what it is?
Basic Government Facilities, LLC.
Government facilities? So what do you all typically do?
We work in IT, architecture, engineering, and many other services we provide.
And you all service the federal government?
Yes.
And state and federal?
Yes.
Yeah, so with that being said, you know, the government will always, especially with the new administration, they're seeking a particular type of servicer, right? And so once you have the accreditations that they're looking for, such as small business owned, women owned, 8A certifications, that kind of limits your competition so you can actually compete. So if there's a large enough marketplace for you, certainly I would say go for it, right? And try to figure out how to get to the buyers. I think that's the conundrum. A lot of government organizations, companies who are serving the federal government, trying to get to the buyers, people who are decision makers, right? And market directly to those folks. So the strategy, as I think about it, may not necessarily have changed, but I think other marketing strategies can be employed, such as leveraging LinkedIn to find who those buyers may be, right? Those procurement officers. I hope that answers a little bit of your question, but I say still go for it. I mean, you just have to think a lot about how to get to those decision makers.
Thank
Does that
you.
make sense?
Yes, that does. That was very helpful.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'd like to close out this Wednesday webinar. And first of all, say thank you so much, Bill, for sharing your story and giving us some tips on how we can leverage your experiences to make the right decisions for our own economic empowerment. And of course, I'd like to thank all of you who have joined and have shared your thoughts and questions. And also thank you for your time and for your membership in this organization. We really appreciate your enthusiasm and your willingness to partake. And it's so nice to have a space like this for all of us to get together and share these things in a safe space and use them to advance ourselves. So thanks everybody for joining. And we look forward to seeing you guys at our next event, our future webinars and meetings.
Thank you, Sarah. And one thing I would like to say is thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of your group. Thank you all for the questions. Danielle, the last young lady, Jasmine, I appreciate it. If you all have any questions about anything I spoke of, please let me know. And Sarah, please feel free to share the presentation. I'm happy to connect with anyone if they would like to connect.
Very good. Yeah, and I put your information in the chat too.
Okay.
So people can reach out to you.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Sure.
You too.
Bye-bye.